Well, I think it's nice that we obviously have a jiu-jitsu coach here, but it might be good to start with an origin story because we all start jiu-jitsu somewhere, and then maybe we can get into talking about, you know, how we help other people through that process and what is jiu-jitsu and what is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. So, it'd be nice to hear about some of your stories and where you started.
Yeah, no. First off, man, thanks for having me out again. It's been a minute, COVID and all that craziness aside, it's good to be home, But yeah, no, I think my story is no different than a lot of people. We just recently had the anniversary of the first UFC, November 12th, '93. That's when Royce changed the landscape. Royce Gracie and his family changed the landscape of martial arts, and I had already been training most of my life. At the time, I was in my mid 20s and discovered jujitsu. And I always had the mentality. I trained martial arts primarily for self-defense. I enjoyed the competitive aspect. I used to do point fighting and forms and other things that were associated with those disciplines. But jujitsu was like a reality check, and I just felt like it was a facet of self-defense that I sorely neglected and desperately needed. And for a while, I was training both disciplines. But then, unfortunately, early into my jiu-jitsu career, my previous instructor had passed away. So the school closed, and it just opened the door for me to just commit fully to BJJ. And I've only been with one school, and that's Jean Jacques Machado Academy. I rolled in there in 1997, and he's been my only master, so to speak. And no real aspirations other than just self-improvement. I just want to become a better student and hopefully someday get the black belt. And all these years later, I got way more than what I had expected. So,
I think that's a common journey too. A lot of people start martial arts for self-defense, and eventually that truth will lead them to, oh, grappling is really important when I can't get away and we're entangled with a with another person, which is really really interesting to me. And then after the journey, like 5, 10 years down the track, and they're like, oh, I didn't think I was going to discover this wonderful platform for self-improvement and like a really healthy, positive lifestyle, which is actually like extremely hard, but equally as rewarding. I've seen it play over and over again in your story and some of my other coaches and my own story. I mean, I I wanted to start martial arts to learn how to deal with that unarmed combat better, and knew after being a UFC fan that like jiu-jitsu and Valley Tudo was the and mixed martial arts was the starting point. And now, being a bit older and carrying injuries, jiu-jitsu is my favorite, and my thought process for jiu-jitsu we now use to teach striking arts as well. So it's definitely a super common thing. What do you think it means to get that black belt when you finally achieve it? Like, what is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt?
to me, it's the very definition of perseverance. It really is. I think that, first of all, I want to say I think anybody, I don't care what limitations you might have self-imposed, I think anybody can get a black belt in this art. You just have to have the right teacher and the right environment. And both are essential because as much as challenging as it is physically to develop the skills necessary to achieve that rank, the mental barriers that are put up far exceed any physical limitations. Mentally, I'm personally for myself, and I have no problem admitting this, my goal was to get a purple belt. Purple belts were magicians. I watched black belts compete, and I'm like, no, I don't see it. And that was my own limitation, and I'm very fortunate I had just somebody who always kept me honest, pushed me when I needed to be pushed, continues to push me in the healthiest of ways. So when you get that belt, there's a whole series of emotions. You get this wave of all the failures, all the setbacks, all the disappointments that came along the way. And in spite of all of that, there you stand with this this achievement, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it will challenge your belief systems along the way as well, which is why it has such that air of like self-improvement around it, and being able to make a more powerful version of yourself, so it can kind of like kill little bits of dogmatic thinking, which is interesting. And I do also believe anyone can get a black belt. And years ago when I was thinking, oh, I'm running a club, what is a black belt going to be like? Are we going to have to make them roll with punches? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? And then I decided, you know what? I was tired of people telling me what my jiu-jitsu was meant to be. And I was like, jiu-jitsu is so wonderful and all-encompassing of sports jiu-jitsu, or people that do it for self-defense or self-improvement or mixed martial arts. Who am I to tell someone if they've persevered, can solve problems using jiu-jitsu, that they can't be a sports black belt, or just be interested in self-defense, or just be interested in mixed martial arts? I don't think that's up to me. So now we encompass all of those things just to allow people to choose that path. I think that black belt is like a way of thinking, like, oh, you think like a
Absolutely.
black belt
Yeah,
now
yeah.
that comes through the perseverance. I tell them, it's like, I'm not teaching you techniques. I want to teach you how to think like a black belt again, so we can have these really nice discussions about the philosophical side of jiu-jitsu, and the technicality of it, and the physics of it, and the mechanics of it, and the strategy of it, which is so much more encompassing than a detail of a technique of just like twist your hand here and it'll be perfect armbar, like, which is funny, but you know
No, because
an important talk.
yeah, because what happens is if you impose your or if you imprint your approach to the art on a student and you force them to conform to your way of thinking, you've just created a clone. When that student becomes a black belt, there's nothing, not much you're going to learn from them, because everything they do is just replicating your your uh, your mentality, your approach to training, your approach to the art. I think it's the opposite. I think you take a student and you allow them to explore the jujitsu that they want to learn. I always tell people, I only teach one type of jujitsu, yours. That's it.
Well, and the added bonus of that is you don't end up with a black belt student, then you end up with a black belt peer, which like, what a wonderful thing to have a peer that you can have rational, intelligent discussions about, rather than the opposite, which is, often martial arts has been called cults before, and some jiu-jitsu schools have been called cults. And it's like, if you don't want a cult, you really have to encourage people to think for
Creative
themselves
thinking,
and
yes.
be creative. And that's a big part of the art of jiu-jitsu, is being able to solve problems under pressure in a chaotic environment and be creative.
Yeah. And then like I always believe, a student told me this once, but they're like, to teach is to learn twice. And when you create a black belt that has been taught to teach to learn on his own, to develop his own way, I have another asset now that I can learn from.
Yeah.
Just because I may be your senior does not mean I'm incapable of not learning from you. We learn from white belts. John Jacques, our headmaster, talks about that all the time. That's why you have students that you can learn from, because if you allow them to free think, you give them principles, but you allow them to take those principles and use it in ways that you might not have imagined. So that's the cerebral aspect. It's why so many of us, myself included, I'm over 2 decades in, and I still approach it with the same vigor, because every day is an opportunity for me to learn. I don't need to be in a room full of black belts or even a coral belt to learn. Put me in a room full of white belts, trust me, I'll learn something.
Yeah, I love that too, because then, sometimes once people know a certain amount, and it can happen at blue belt, it can happen at purple belt, it can definitely happen at brown belt, they no longer want to train with the white belts anymore. But it's really important for them to not just to stay sharp with dealing with the unpredictability of the white belt, but it's your job to turn that person then into a better training partner, you know, give them a better understanding of the art, and be able to kind of improve your community like everybody did before you.
Yeah.
It's your community responsibility to kind of help out with that every now and then.
Pay
You
it
know, like, and
forward.
it can definitely be lost, but paying it forward is definitely a an important and worthwhile task. Some will pay it forward a little, and then other people will coach and run seminars and travel the world or run academies, and they'll pay it forward a lot. But it's, you know, like, it's definitely, I'm super grateful to be able to pay it forward every time, and I never really get sick of training white belts, because I like that part of the journey. It's definitely the one where you can see the most results out of a person. You know, that white to blue is definitely a special time for
Yeah,
people.
absolutely, absolutely. You don't lose sight of that. I mean, when I met you, I believe you were a purple belt.
Yeah, yeah. I think I got my purple belt when I met you down in Bendigo at Stewie's house for BJJ with Paul Kale, and well, probably every time you've come to Australia since, I've made the pilgrimage, and we became part of the JJM association about that same time, and that's now, I mean, it's probably a good 6 years ago now, at least, if not more.
Yeah, I think it's 7 years. I think I came down. Stewie gave me my first opportunity to come to Australia. You know, it's like I have to give that acknowledgement and that gratitude. Like he took a chance. You know, I'm not Jean Jacques. I mean, I always tell people, like, you can learn from anybody, and sometimes the real gems are the guys that no one's ever heard of. You know, and I'm very fortunate. I'm not a big self-promoting guy or marketing guy, but I do help run the association. I've been with Jean Jacques so long, and I've kind of his second in command, so to speak. So going to Stewie's was life changing for me, and it created exposure to this network that we have down here, and you're one of them. You know, so I'm so happy to be able to watch your evolution, watch everybody here in Australia, but always spending time with you guys and watching you, the work ethic, the commitment to your students, watching the development of the students. I can tell a lot about an instructor by how good his students are coming along. And it's been 3 years since I've been here and seeing the progression, and just awarded your first black belt last night, you know, which was pretty amazing. So it's very, very inspiring.
Yeah, it was important. It's definitely been an important mission to me to, like, try and, like, encourage high performance, persistence, and community. I always tell people I often feel like a facilitator of opportunities. You know, I can't I can't put the passion and drive in you. I can show it to you,
Yes.
you know, and I can open doors, but sometimes, like, I laugh sometimes. Hey, Ian, can you turn me into an MMA fighter? No, 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 no. I can't. I can't do that. You know, what I can do is I can show you how you can turn yourself into something a little bit more powerful, but it'll be your version of that powerful thing. But I can't do it for you. I can only show you. You know, and I think that's important. And you know, I definitely, Fiona was our first black belt, and I feel no ownership over her skills, because it's been an amazing journey of persistence and, you know, giving up and starting again, and, you know, personal challenges and physical challenges, you know. So I mean, her and I are the oldest war dogs at the at the club, and I think as we get older, we'll be able to hold on to more older students and show them that there is a good way to stay
Yes.
involved in jiu-jitsu, and there is a healthy culture of lifting people up and giving them opportunities to be black belts and supporting them fully, you know.
Yeah, and this approach, it's what I call the long game. You know, you don't your jujitsu journey shouldn't have shelf life. I hit a certain age, my physical, you know, abilities start to diminish, and I can't do this anymore. No, you know, the right approach, the right technical training, mentally understanding when do I need to start to evolve and adapt and playing the long game, and being able to train into your 50s and your 60s and beyond. There's no limits. There are red belts in their 80s
Yeah.
that they're still out there on the mat, you know, and to have that longevity is a testament to their approach to the art, and that's what we're pursuing.
Yeah, and it is a long game. I mean, some people might even like look at things that have recently happened in the UFC with a guy like Alex Pereira having 6 MMA fights ever, but like they don't see the 20 years of kickboxing that he
Yes.
did before then, and it's always a long game. And the message to parents of jiu-jitsu kids, or the message to anyone starting martial arts, is like it is a long game, and most of the benefits are found inside the long game, not the short game, especially if you want to experience all the extra wonderful things that we're talking about, like, that change your way of thinking for all your problems. If you want it to really have an effect on your life, you got to play the long game.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like Jean-Jacques says, our motto, I don't fight, I do jujitsu.
Yeah, and
That's it.
I do love that, and it's something that I have taken on from him, and I tell them in every class, we don't fight, we box. We don't fight, we do Muay Thai. We don't fight, we do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
we're not training fighters here, we're training martial artists who have the ability to fight. That's just part of what they do. And it's good to have a little bit of fight in you and know when to fight, and that's what martial arts will teach you. And then hopefully my goal is that it helps people not just fight other people, but help you fight your problem with your boss, because you can take 3 deep breaths and deal with that problem better, and things like that, which
Yeah.
it's got to be important.
No, absolutely. It's probably the number one thing I tell most new students or prospective students, and especially the parents of our kids that come in, is that I have experience with all forms of martial arts coming up before jujitsu. I had a whole different career. I think there's merit and value to every art out there. If it's something that you're passionate about or that it strikes you, go after it and chase it and train it. Not everything needs to be about, cage readiness or MMA this or self. If it's an art that you enjoy, do it. But the thing I love about jujitsu more than anything is physically is the only art I've ever studied, one of the few that gives you the power of de-escalation. I don't need to hurt you to control the situation. And what an amazing mentality to take off the map. You're met with hostility, you're met with conflict. Like, take a deep breath, just like you said. And how can I use my training to de escalate this situation so it doesn't have to escalate and potentially get a lot worse? That's the thing that I enjoy the most about my training. I can take somebody who's coming at me aggressive, even in training, and through body contact and touch, calm them down. I can amp it up for sure. That's what we're built to do. But I think there's more strength and more power in the ability to hold back. And that's the inner peace, that's the confidence. Those are the things that are going to help us as we get older.
Yeah, which is which is definitely, obviously, super commendable. And it takes, like, an interesting culture where you to be able to develop someone to be like, hey, here's this fight sport, combat sport. I'm going to teach you how to violently end a confrontation if needed to be. Here are the steps, but I'm going to tell you to slow down.
Oh, that's the duality. Yeah, no, because your
You know?
training has to be that. What are we training for? The submission. Like, you have to have the ability. I don't know what my limits are unless I go after them. And if I want to take you out in 30 seconds, I will. That's why, competition is I think it's not essential, but it should be an important part of your development if that's what you're looking for. But once you know that, hey, I can take somebody out that quick because I've trained my body to do it, that's what gives you the confidence. Now I can choose that, or I can choose peace. I can choose violence, or I can choose peace. If you're not trained, you have no choice. You have to choose violence,
Yeah,
but you have to get to that point before you can go for the latter.
yeah. Which has always been my argument with it, with any kind of police forces. Unfortunately, like, they have to choose strange pain compliance techniques that we know don't really work, because they just don't have the hours to put in the training to be less violent. So it's definitely a very unique thing about jiu-jitsu, and I think the world will eventually catch on to how useful that is. And
It is becoming there's a movement in the U.S. A lot of the law enforcement agencies are starting to embrace jiu-jitsu more for that reason.
And Japan had already embraced
Yeah.
judo as a
Yeah.
police force culture many years ago, you know, and they're so confident in them in themselves, you know. It's definitely something worth thinking about. Now, we know that you've traveled all over the world, and Jean-Jacques has how many clubs in the States affiliated with him now?
In the
In the
U.S.,
US?
I would probably say about 20. We're not
20.
big on numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
20.
that's still a lot of clubs to visit when you think if I was to personally try and open 20 clubs, it would be quite difficult. What do you think sets apart uh, the good clubs from the ones that struggle? How do they maintain that high performance uh, culture of like having really good competitors and then really kind people on the mat at the same time? How do
Just
you achieve that?
leadership, and sharing the same approach we take to how we run our school back home, our headquarters. You know, Jean-Jacques does the best he can, but you know, he's a man that's just got so much on his plate. That's where I was fortunate enough to fall in the position that I'm in because I communicate with most of our association, and they're go-getters. You know, you yourself, I mean, your work ethic, you won't take a break. Like you're there for your students, you're committed to your school. It's a selfless endeavor, and you don't lean necessarily on us. Well, help me. What do I do? Like you know what to do. You know, it's just like we talked about earlier. You know, I can't make you a good MMA fighter. I can show you the potential you have. Running schools is the same thing. You have leadership. They like, no, this is my passion. I represent this organization, and I want to help improve people off the mat and on the mat. And it's just the investment. If you look at it from the standpoint of just a business, I open a school, I'm going to hire a staff to teach, and I'm the money guy, and it's going to make all this money. There's nothing that says you can't be successful. But if you're invested emotionally and you believe in the mission that we're trying to accomplish, you're going to be successful. It just takes time, like everything. Jiu-jitsu itself, you tell somebody comes up to you and says, you know, okay, I just signed up. When do I get my blue belt? Well, mate, that's entirely up to you. It could take 5 years. It could take 8 months. It just depends what's your effort, you know, your
Yeah.
effort or your commitment, your dedication. It might be the first week you're here all the time, then you start to wean off.
Yeah,
So,
and realistic, I've probably been coaching in Townsville since 2008, maybe. You know, I helped somebody else open their own center that had martial arts in there, ran my own mixed martial arts program there for 6 years, and you know, while all the while subcontracting and competing as an athlete at the same time, and actually volunteering a bunch of my own time to raise money for veterans and all these other things. Like I was doing lots of things. Like the more you can do, the more you know, the more you can do, and it's uh it's a long game. So then
yeah.
when you open up, it's like, oh, how did he even get all these students? Like, well, he was teaching for 6 years before that, you know, and then it's like, oh, how do you have so many senior guys at your club? Well, again, I was teaching for 6 years before that, so you know, students come and go, and now, you know, I'm Encouraged Training Center. I think I registered the name for that in 2014, and you know, we're not far away from our 10-year
Yeah,
anniversary, but I've
yeah.
actually been, you know, coaching for almost as long as I've been training because when we started in Townsville, there wasn't much. You know, when my first coaches didn't travel away with me to fights. There wasn't a support network. You were just kind of figuring it out at the
Yeah.
same time. I actually went with, you know, one of the guys that was doing the hardest rounds with me at the gym was my corner guy. Neither him or I had even seen a live mixed martial arts event before,
Straight into the fire.
you know. So it was really interesting experience, and I suppose, you know, it's been my mission to make that path easier for everyone else, you know, whether it be, you know, like not just for mixed martial arts, but it's like, you know, I started because I wanted to do this jiu-jitsu and vale tudo thing. I mean, that was why people took up jiu-jitsu at the beginning, and there was no local tournaments. Now we've run 7 or 8 local tournaments here to make that even easier for people in the North Queensland region, which is really nice. And we've run all different types, submission only, points, ADC style rules, round robins. I even had one of my students do a no time limit match with another wonderful young guy here, and those guys fought for 55 minutes. Like it was one of those amazing no time limit things that you think you'd only see on the internet. I can't believe those guys fought for 55 minutes, but it's been one hell of a journey, and I do think that one of the interesting things that people might not be doing along that, they realize that I've worked real hard to build relationships at every step along the way, whether it was my training partner that was willing to give me time to corner me for my first couple of MMA fights, or a coach who was willing to travel to me. I would then travel to that coach and try and give as much as I received all the time. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
whether you're a white belt or a blue belt, when you run up, the first thing you can do is start giving by just being a really attentive student and a really good training partner.
yeah.
You're going to give. And then when you're a blue belt, you should be looking to give to people who might not know as much as you. And then that should continue, hopefully, all the way through to black belt. And if you're a little bit older, like us, and you're slowing down a little bit more, you're going to hopefully stay in the art and keep giving and giving back. Which is
Absolutely.
really important. What do you think is the best attribute for someone as a white belt when they're starting to have a think about how they can help themselves through that journey? If they've seen this art and they're like, I want to be a black belt one day, and they've done a couple of weeks of classes and they're like, yep, I think I can stick it out. What do you think's the one thing that they really need to
So,
start
I
thinking
mean,
about?
I think patience is the first. Definitely. If you're impatient, you're going to struggle because this is not something that you can't rush the results, And then the second thing that's right behind it, it's going to be a little bit of a controversial word, but faith. I'm not talking in terms of like spiritual or religious faith. I just mean the faith in your teacher. Because the hardest thing with jujitsu is you'll start to make some progress, then you'll hit a wall. And I've seen it and I've experienced it. And then you're going to go to your instructor and say, well, I'm having this issue. How do I get around it? And your teacher's going to say, let go. What you're doing, I want you to take a step back. You're going to suffer, you're going to struggle a little bit. You're going to have a little bit more setback. But if you do this, if you follow what I'm telling you, you'll take a step back, but then it's going to jump you forward. It's going to project you forward. And that's a balancing act. And some students will embrace that information and others will just run from it and persist. They'll both develop, but the one that follows the information will develop much faster. It's going to,
Like, funnily enough, I have a tattoo on my leg uh, with some prayer hands, and I'm not even religious, but it's got my dog tags in it to remind me that, like, no matter what you're doing, have faith in your training and the process. Like, whether you're going to war, have faith in the training and the process. And that was something that I did from the beginning when I started fighting mixed martial arts. Is I had faith in the process. If I've fully committed to this process, I've planned, I've worst case scenario everything, and I've done the hill sprints, and I've done the hard yards, and I've crossed my T's and dotted my I's. I can have faith that, like, whatever happens now is meant to happen,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then your outcome will be just the response to the result. you know okay, well, the outcome was I won, sweet, done well. Do that stuff again. Could I have done better? Well, maybe you fail, and then your outcome isn't that you lost. The outcome is that you learned from the fact that your cardio was no good, that your wrestling against the cage was no good, that you had not as good a sweep game as you thought when you were doing the jiu-jitsu comp. All those things are so important, and it's that faith in the process. So I'm kind of really glad that you said that, because it wouldn't have been something that I thought of off the top of my head. But it's something that I really do strongly believe in. If you can have faith in the process, and again, yep, faith in your instructors, your training partners, and everyone to be part of that process is really important.
Yeah, I attribute that to I read a lot, and one of my favorite books is called The Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts, who's a big Zen philosopher. And it's a quote. I marked it and I live by it. And it's very simple. It's belief clings, faith lets go. And that's how I approach my jujitsu. That's how I
Yeah,
approach my training, my art. It's like there's certain things that we will cling to for life. But then I kind of realized, like, no, I have to let go. There's certain
yeah.
physical things, emotional things, conflict. It's just something
Well,
I live by, and you can attach that to however
belief
you
is
believe.
kind of I believe, but like faith is like
Yeah,
I know I've done the work. You
yeah, yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. That's exactly
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So,
I love that. I love that. That is really good.
so